IVM.
Hey everybody, quick request once again, if you could help us out by filling out our survey. It's at ivmpodcast.com/survey. This really helps us talk to advertisers about the kinds of people listening to these shows. Really do appreciate your help, and we're going to be doing a random drawing, and we'll be sending out some IVM swag. Hope you enjoy that.
Hello and welcome to this final episode of 2020 of the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast. As usual, I've got my friends and co-podcasters Varun and Ashwin with me. It's been a week of highs and lows. Varun, first, how are you feeling, man? Have you been texting all your Aussie friends back about the 36 all-out after India have now won the Boxing Day test?
Absolutely, man. It feels surreal. I've been messaging people all over. I've been saying we've done it without King Kohli. Nobody expected this from us. And I can't wait for today's episode for us to deep dive into everything.
And Ashwin, how are you feeling, man? Is this a bit of a Christmas miracle, you feel?
Man, to be honest, when they hit the winning runs, which was a little bit anticlimactic because I thought it was going to go for 4, but for some reason, the Aussies started fielding really well when there were 7 runs left to chase down with 8 wickets in hand. But when they hit that winning run, I think I just sat back in my couch and just stared at the TV blankly. I was just overwhelmed. I think having to deal with 36 all out, having to deal with the loss of Kohli, the loss of Shami, 2 other changes in the side. I mean, there's just so much conversation about India being overrated and all of these things. It was just, I think I posted this on our Discord, but there was relief, there was pure joy, there was just so much happiness for Rahane. So it's just been a whirlwind of emotions kind of in the last 12 hours or so.
Yeah, I think we can all say that it's been extremely emotional for us after the lows of that 36 all out. We all kind of took a little while coming back from that, getting our head straight. But let's start with the build up to this test match, right? We talked about the Boxing Day test. Guys, we were talking on a WhatsApp group, right? And I think I was the one that said that it's going to take a miracle for India to come back. And what we got was the miracle of Melbourne, right? Varun, I think I said we had less than a 10% chance of winning this Boxing Day test. Was that a fair assessment at the outset?
I mean, all of us did feel that, right? In my head, I can't remember if I said it or not, but I thought this was going to be a whitewash. I said, while Kohli and Shami were playing, we got hammered so badly. So without these two, no idea what's going to happen. You had started to kind of tell yourself that it's okay. This is not the best Indian playing 11. This is not going to be our series. And I mean, yeah, I think that the 36 all out was unacceptable. But now, okay, I mean, hindsight is always great. But having heard Kohli, Rahane, and all of them talk about one bad hour, I kind of get it, right? It was one bad hour. Things collapsed. They say shit happens, but I can't believe what has happened. Like I think it was a fair assessment for all of us to think that India was going to get outplayed in the Boxing Day test, but they came back and did fantastic.
Ashwin, do you think this is up there with the wins at Eden Gardens in 2001, the win in Perth in 2008, and just in terms of coming back from such a depth of despair, really? Like, I mean, it was embarrassment, really, that all our Indian fans were feeling, and the character that this team has shown to bounce back from that. So does this rank up there with those momentous wins?
That's been a big topic of discussion lately. People were asking Rahane, was the century he made here the greatest century he's ever hit? And he actually replied, no, he thinks his Lord's century was slightly better. But so to answer your question, I'd say from a cricketing standpoint and a technical standpoint, if you will, or match situation specifically, I don't think it's quite as up there as the other two, as 01 and 08. But, and before I start getting hate mail for this, from a context standpoint, from the standpoint of the total series, from what's going on in the world, from the fact that, like as Varun said, we lost Kohli, we lost Shami, we lost Umesh halfway through the match as well. There's so many things that add up to give this match so much more context than other matches over the years. So from that perspective, I absolutely think it is up there with India's biggest wins. By the way, we hadn't won in the MCG since the 80s, I think, right? And then until 18-19, the season 2 years ago. So we take that for granted too. But any win at the MCG is huge. When you add in all the context of all this other, everything around it, it is momentous.
Yeah, and I just want to add one more thing. India have gotten all out for 42 sometime, I think, in 1974 versus England. And after that test match, what I remember reading that the next match, India lost by an innings. the following test match after getting all out for 42. So that talks to say a little bit about the mindset, about how hard it is to come back from that. You're demoralized. You have to pick yourself up. You're battling all these demons that all the batsmen played terrible shots. And so especially given that last stat about 30 years ago, for me, this was just fantastic.
And remember, that wasn't even a COVID year. I mean, these guys have been in a bio bubble. There was some chat between the commentators about how Australia aren't in the right headspace because they've been in this bio bubble, to which our boy Sunil Gavaskar replies saying, well, 36 all out can be attributed to the bio bubble. But it's been a weird.
There seems like there's Steve Smith is specifically struggling during the bio bubble. And I'm so blown away by this conversation. And I'm glad to see the responses being like, listen, boys, everybody's been in the bio bubble. So to just say Smith's form is because of the bubble is bizarre, right? So anyway, sorry.
And what happened, DJ? I thought Smith found his hands.
Yeah, he's clearly lost them again.
I hope he spends New Year's Eve finding his hands back.
No. We want him to be handless for the rest of the series, man. And for Prithvi Shaw, I mean, to score more runs in 2020 than Steve Smith is just the greatest stat ever. I love it. But I mean, it's been such a weird year. It's been a year of highs and lows. It's been a year of COVID, and it's ended on such a high note for Indian fans and the Indian cricket team. And I'm so glad we're able to do this and share this joy. I mean, it's been a lot of despair. 36 all out hurt us so much, but I'm so glad. And I know we've all been looking forward to getting together and doing this podcast, but I'm going to try and keep this podcast, as you guys said, below 2 hours. So let's get into the actual test match itself, guys. And let's start right from the top. Team selection, you mentioned briefly. We had a forced change with Kohli not playing. We had a forced change with Shami not playing. Shaw, as expected, sat out and Gill came in. Saha was dropped and Pant came in. Shami was replaced by Siraj. And then very interesting, Ashwin, and I'm going to come to you on this. Kohli was replaced effectively by Jadeja, right? So let's talk about this, because all of us on last week's episode feels like a year ago. Anyway, last week's episode said KL Rahul should come into bat at 4. Now, what is the thinking there? What was the theory there? Why not replace Kohli with KL Rahul and replace him with Jadeja?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I mean, listeners who've heard this show for a while now will know I'm a huge fan of Ravindra Jadeja, probably bigger than the two of you even. And I was the one questioning this exactly the way you did. I still said, are you going to replace the world's best batsman with an all-rounder who, let's be honest, has been a bowling all-rounder for the better part of his test career? And just how does it mess up your balance? Are you going to push Rahane and Vihari up to 4-5? Or are you going to bat Jadeja at 4 and keep Rahane and Vihari at 5 and 6? And so there were so many questions going in. Obviously, we now know they pushed everybody up. They moved Rahane to 4, Vihari to 5, Pant played at 6, and then Jadeja played at 7. I think it was a big decision. I mean, look, I already mentioned this, but we all know now we did lose Umesh's bowling services midway through the match as well. And having that fifth, I don't want to say out-and-out bowler, but high-quality enough bowler turned out to be a masterstroke. And by the way, Jadeja looked $1 million with the bat as well. So I think, being able to look back, I'm glad to say I was wrong about, like I said, because obviously we got the India win and I'm a huge fan of Jadeja, but it feels like all week I've been saying, man, if Jadeja's batting can stay like this and he can be a quality number 7, maybe a number 6 someday, it opens up 1,000 new options for India, because you start thinking, okay, you can always have 2 quality spinners on the road. You can have 3 quality spinners playing in India. You can play 2 Ashwin, maybe a Kuldeep, and then Jadeja, because he's in the team, to bat at 6 or 7. So just a big win for us. He's obviously not going to score runs every time he gets out there, but very, very tough decision, very big decision. Rahane backed the need for 5 bowlers, and it turned out right in this instance.
So let's go to the pitch and the toss, Ashwin. India lost the toss and was put into field. Rahane said that he would have batted first, but you had a few observations about the pitch itself, Ashwin. What did you make of this Boxing Day test match strip?
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, in hindsight, again, I think it gave us a great cricket match. So I'm thankful that the quality of cricket turned out good. There were a couple of things I was specifically highlighting that I wasn't so thrilled about, right? The first being the amount of turn that Ashwin was getting on day 1. I mean, if you remember, Ashwin came into bowl in the first session ahead of Mohammad Siraj, which was an interesting captaincy call where Siraj didn't get to bowl out till after lunch. And then Nathan Lyon came into bowl at the end of, I think he came in at the end of day one and early into day two. I think it was more early into day two that I was reacting to. And the amount of turn he was getting on the morning of a day two pitch in Melbourne, I think to be honest, my specific reaction was just, if an off spinner was getting that much turn on a end of day one, early day two pitch in India, the Aussie critics and former players and selectors would have been up in arms saying, look at these dust bowls, and it just, the pitches are not good enough to last 5 days, etc. Here, we're sitting here saying the first test got done in 3 days, second got done in 4. Maybe some of it's the quality of batting, maybe some of it's the quality of bowling we've seen, etc. But I think, again, in hindsight, the pitch turned out fine. I just wish there wasn't a set of different standards for when pitches turn aggressively in India, and you call them horrendous. And when you start seeing turn on day 1 and 2 in Australia, people are excited, saying, wow, look at this, the ball is turning. So anyway, hopefully we'll get to a point someday where we have the same set of standards for India and Australia pitches.
Yeah, superb observation there, I think. And you mentioned very briefly Rahane's captaincy, so I'm going to come to that. But Australia batted first, got 195 all out. Bumrah took 4. Ashwin bowled beautifully to take 3. Siraj took 2. Varun, I'm going to ask you about Rahane's captaincy. Of course, he was standing in for the skipper, the usual skipper, Virat Kohli, who'd gone back home to attend the birth of his child. What did you firstly make of him going to Ashwin so early on and holding Siraj back? He went to spin in the 10th over, and honestly, I could never see Kohli doing that.
Yeah, and we did talk about this, right? That captains are different. Kohli believes in out-and-out pace. If you look at even the RCB 11, that's the way he builds his team. And there's no right or wrong, but it was just beautiful to see Rahane trust Ashwin, bring him on before the 10th over, I think in the second innings. I can't remember in the first innings. And Ashwin kind of repaid that faith. So for me, I think personally, Rahane was fantastic. He was very fresh. I almost feel like using the word tactician for him, which one could not really say that about Kohli. But I do want to say that for Indian cricket in general, I think it's a great sign. And DJ, I don't know if you remember this, but you and I were in Nottingham a couple of years back, and we were in a taxi. And in that taxi, the taxi driver actually told us that Rahane, Ashwin, and Pujara took a cab, and they were chilling, and they went to a restaurant. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You even mentioned it on the last episode, right?
Yeah,
they are the leadership group, so to speak.
Absolutely. Now. So when you've got these 3 guys who are friends, they're not worried about being dominated by a Kohli Shastri combination. I really feel like they sat down. They probably sat up late at night with pen and paper. They look the old school type. They look the kind of guys who have data, watch videos. Made plans, made backup plans to the backup plans, and just wanted to get out there and execute it. So I think that was really great for me. Like I said, it felt fresh. And from a captaincy perspective, kudos to Rahane. The reality is that he was under no pressure. All of us were expecting a 4-0. Even when Kohli was there, we were 1-0 down. So to come in with such a positive attitude to say, how do we win this, rather than say, how do we go for a draw? I think it was just fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. And a lot of captains would have settled for a draw, waiting for Rohit Sharma to come and save the day, right? And I was almost minded to do that given the disaster of the first test. But Ashwin, I'm going to ask you about these field placements that he put in place for Ashwin. Varun talked about data-driven friends and kind of strategic stuff. And that leg slip for Ashwin and also for Siraj, we haven't really seen those plans come off under Kohli for some reason. Why is that?
It's really hard to say why specific plans worked for one captain and not the other. I do love how tactically sound Rahane is. I love how much you could visibly see, as Varun said, but Pujara and Ashwin were part of the decision-making. Ashwin is a phenomenal thinking cricketer. And, not backed by much data, but I don't know how much Kohli listens to him when it comes to field placements, etc. I know Kohli does take Rohit's point of view, for example, very seriously in the field. So maybe just a combination of tweaking and trying different things early on that the captain listened to his players that enabled them to succeed. Now, let's be clear. There were a couple of times when I wish as a captain he didn't listen to his bowlers who were trying for reviews. In this case, Siraj playing his first ever match was just so overexcited and wanted everything to be reviewed. So there's times when a captain has to make the call and say no, but there are times when the bowler does understand their plan just as well, if not better. And I think this was just one of those days when the combination of Rahane's thinking and putting Ashwin or having Ashwin in his ear as well just worked well. The way he got Steve Smith out yet again was just fantastic.
Oh yeah, and there's going to be lots of chat about the styles of captaincy by Rahane and Kohli and stuff. So to my mind, actually, Kohli is a leader of men, right? He leads by example. He's there in the field, running around, jumping, diving around. He's aggressive. He's in your face. Rahane is more of a strategist, right? So there's two totally different styles of leadership almost, Varun. I don't know. What do you make of that? Looking ahead, how can we bring those two strands together and maybe get Kohli to involve other more senior players in discussions? Is that something that we can look forward to seeing?
I mean, we hope so, DJ. I was telling somebody just today evening that is the best outcome for us. Look, I've been reading a lot of stuff on Twitter. I've been reading a lot of stuff other people are saying. The point is, I think it's important to just give my point of view to the listeners. This is not a zero-sum game. When Rahane wins, Kohli does not lose, right? So the impact of this is not Kohli must give up captaincy. Kohli is a terrible captain. As much as everyone in India wants to say that, we need to hold back. That's not what this means. What this means is that we need somebody like a Shastri or other players, maybe Rohit Sharma, somebody else to step up, or maybe Kohli to realize it himself that all he needs to do is take into account different opinions, understand that everyone is experienced. I mean, we spoke about Rahane, Pujara and Ashwin, but Bumrah was the leader of the fast bowling attack. And after the innings was out, the way he was talking, he's a leader there. So, Kohli is the leader. Everyone looks up to him. Nobody's trying to take his place. But we just hope that there is more discussion. I think that is the best outcome for Indian cricket.
And for all we know, there may be behind the scenes, right? We don't know. And Kohli takes a lot of the heat from particularly in Australia, because they call him the head of the snake. There's so much focus on him. They're obsessed with him almost. And this test match allowed the other players to kind of take center stage and almost flower. And it was great to see that you could see them coming up with ideas. Bumrah was very much in charge of the bowling. Pujara and Ashwin and Rahane were all coming together to discuss. It was just great to see. I really, really enjoyed it. And I think it's great signs for Indian cricket, particularly since I think Rahane would have won the respect of all his players with this incredible win. Absolutely incredible win. But let's move ahead. You talked a little bit about the Smith dismissal. Ashwin, I'm going to come to that. Smith made a comment about Ashwin dictating terms to him. Smith hasn't scored any runs. He got out for a duck in the first innings and scored 8 in the second innings. What's going on with Steve Smith? He's lost his hands clearly, but why is he struggling so much against Ravichandran Ashwin?
I mean, I think credit to the bowler and credit to the fielding, as I said, right? Yeah, Smith seems like he's lost his hands, but he seemed to have found them in the ODIs, right? So, and his T20s even. So he's just had a couple of poor innings. I'm always extra cautious when saying something about an all-time great like Steve Smith, because I know he's going to come back. It could be in the third test. I hope it's not. It could be in the fourth. It could be in the final innings of the fourth test. But you know that a player like this has probably gone off the pitch in Melbourne and gone straight to the nets to just work on whatever it was that wasn't working. Probably getting young off spinners from around the country to come bowl to him. And just, you know he's going to be working really, really hard at it. So I think credit where it's due. Absolutely fantastic plans for Smith from Ashwin and Rahane. In this case, in the first inning, Ashwin is getting a lot of bounce and he used that to his advantage. And it really brought me back to Anil Kumble days when the spinner is getting more or extracting more pace and bounce from the wicket than some of the seamers. But magnificent. He bounced it, he bowled it well, pitched it kind of middle and offline, got it just enough off break and enough bounce that he was tempted to flick it down and got caught at leg slip. So outstanding. And obviously India needed to hold on to their catches, and in this match they did.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge wicket. Talking about catches, the next wicket to go down was that of Matthew Wade, and what a catch Jadeja took with Gill kind of almost banging into him. Pant had been saying that this is going to go up. So it was just a great wicket with all these factors combining. And I mean, again, the value that Jadeja adds in the field, right? India's catching throughout, Varun. I mean, if everything could go wrong in Adelaide for India, it did. But in this test match, I can think of maybe one catch that went down of Rishabh Pant, perhaps in the second innings when Pat Cummins edged it off Ashwin. But other than that, we were almost flawless, right?
Yeah, and I think that catch also went down because Pant was more interested in saying, oi, right? So he was more focused on the banter and chat, which I'm sure you'll get to. But everything worked. I think, DJ, nothing to add to that. It was look, you can set up the best plans, but if you take even that Smith dismissal, the ball could have hit the ground before. The ball could have popped into Pujara's hand at leg slip and popped out. Everything worked. And I think after the horrendous day that India had at Adelaide, I think we kind of deserved this. So I'm really glad to see that.
Yeah, and of course there was the controversy around the third umpire not giving Tim Payne out. Now, Ashwin, I know you had some thoughts about that. What went on there? Just talk our listeners through the Tim Payne quote-unquote run out in the first innings.
Yeah, so the cameras that we have for these broadcasts are 50 frames per second. The world has technology up to, I think, 120 now. Somebody more tech savvy than me can share that. But basically, the bails were removed in between the two frames. And in one frame, he was out of the crease. And in the next frame, he was what looked to me like on the line, maybe a hair over. But by the time he was a hair over the crease, Rishabh Pant had dislodged the bails. And so just a lot of controversy. First off, I thought the third umpire in this test match seemed hell-bent on making decisions so fast. I mean, normally umpires are the opposite end where they rock and roll it and they look at the same angle 6 different times and they zoom in and they go back to the old angle. And in this case, the umpire seemed like he was just driven to make the decision very, 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 very quickly. And so he looked at one angle where it looked out, looked at the other angle, and it looked like there was just enough over the line, which to me, by the way, again, they were at different points in the frame because so the two cameras didn't have the exact same second marking on the same frame. And it looked like there could have been shadow, right? When your bat is touching the ground with the sun being at a specific angle, the shadow is also going over the line. So people will disagree with me. Some people will say it was clearly in. It just felt like you could have taken a little bit more time, done a split screen with the two angles together, looking at the timestamps, and figured out that the bail was dislodged most likely in between frames when the bat wasn't over the line. So disappointing. Fortunately, didn't have a massive difference on the outcome of the game because Payne got out shortly after, but would have been very upsetting if it did.
Yeah, absolutely. And very interesting suggestion there about the timestamps. I thought that's particularly interesting, right? Anyway, the Australian innings packed up at 195 all out, which, having lost the toss, India would have been really pleased with that. But what that left them with was a little session on day one. Out walks Shubman Gill making his test debut. Out walks with him Mayank Agarwal, not in the greatest of form, coming off 17 and I think 9 in the Adelaide test. And Mitch Starc, as he so often does, with the bright new red ball. That first over, guys, Mayank goes on the last ball of that first over after looking completely at sea against Starc's seam swing. At that stage, was there a little bit of a sinking feeling given that we'd lost effectively 12 wickets for 36 runs, right? By that stage. Varun, was it a bit of here we go again?
Yeah, it was sad because you really didn't want to lose a wicket that evening. You didn't want Starc again in the first over to set the momentum for the Australian innings. So I was disappointed. I hate to say this, but I think Mayank is struggling right now. His I'm not a technician of the game. Like, I don't understand technique as well as you, DJ, but his backlift is just so high. I don't think he's able to play that incoming ball. And, I can't help but say this, but on the other end, Shubman Gill just looked like he belonged there. It looked like we've delayed a test debut for him. And so when you compare the two openers, you just have to feel a little bit for Mayank. And I don't know how it's going to play third test onwards. Again, I'm sure we'll discuss that.
Ashwin, how memorable would that first 5 or 10 minutes at the crease have been for Shubman Gill, where he played and misplayed and then unleashed an absolutely beautiful drive of Pat Cummins?
Yeah, no matter how much first-class cricket you've played, how much A cricket you've played, how much you've played in the nets, when you are batting against one of the world's best quick bowling attacks, if not the best, with
and Pat Cummins is number one,
yeah,
right
correct.
On top.
Batting against the number one bowler in the world who is just consistently bowling in that same, 2 square inch mark where it's just dangerous enough to make you play at it and play and miss. His heart rate must have been 2x than normal. He must have been sweating profusely. And what's amazing is to see, and by the way, same true for Cameron Green, right? Credit to him for doing well for his team. But for Gill, just to see, slowly as you can see him find his composure, back himself, go back to the technique that has got him to this level, focus on, using soft hands when he plays at it, using a firmer stance when he leans into the ball to drive. There were some balls he just pushed and looked like they should have just rolled to mid-off, and they just timed so perfectly that they went to the boundary. So it was magnificent to watch him find his footing and essentially proclaim to the world that I belong at this level.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been talking about Prithvi Shaw as the new Virender Sehwag, but I mean, from what I saw in this test match, maybe we've been looking at the wrong guy all along. Maybe it's actually Shubman Gill that's going to be the new Virender Sehwag. He scores quickly, brilliant driver of the cricket ball. The sound of his bat, man, I mean, it just sounds so good. And he's got the pull shot, he's got the cut shot, he can drive on the up, and he doesn't look like he's uncertain. He's sure of his game. He backs himself. And it was just brilliant to watch. He rode his luck a little bit, mind you. Manas Labuschagne dropped him on the first day when he was on 4. All of that goes towards building a career. I mean, we could be having a completely different conversation, right, if Labuschagne had grabbed that one. He also rode his luck a little bit the next day when he came back in. But I think that 45 really showed us that he belongs there. Pujara batted with him as well in his usual way, held up one end, tiring the bowlers out. But then there was a little wobble at first session day 2, right? And India ended that with Pujara gone. We had Gill gone as well. So it was Vihari and Rahane at the crease, 90 for 3. Guys, Varun, I'm going to ask you this one. At 90 for 3, anyone's game at that stage?
Yeah, I think so. It was anyone's game. I'll tell you why. Mainly because you have Pant and Jadeja to follow, both a little bit untested. Both haven't had much match practice for tests. So at that point, you were not sure what was going to happen. But I mean, DJ, I'm just going to run through this a little bit in terms of, Rahane's inning. I think Rahane stood up, and I was watching on TV. He, in the first test, he seemed to be pushing at the ball. In the second test, he seemed to employ this thing called dead bat, right? And the ball was falling just next to his bat, next to his feet. So I thought that was beautiful. Vihari looked good. Vihari seemed to be taking some of the pressure off Rahane, but I don't know what happened to him. He played, in my opinion, a terrible, terrible shot. Both Gill and Vihari, I think, just gave away their wickets when they were looking good. And that worried me, because when that starts happening, psychologically, as Ashwin mentioned, you are one batsman short when you have Jadeja and Pant to follow, especially when Jadeja is officially replacing Kohli. So I was worried, but, Pant and Jadeja came out, did their thing, and DJ, I'll let you talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Ashwin actually, because it was 112 for 4 when our boy Rishabh Pant walks out. The Indian innings seemed to have stalled a little bit. Rahane was obviously there, who'd come in at 4. But Ashwin, how important was that innings from Pant? I know we're the Rishabh Pant show. We love the guy. But that little shift in momentum in the overall context, 29 of 40, how did you place that innings in the context of the test match?
I think the most telling stat, so disclaimer, if you listen to the show and are surprised by bias towards Rishabh Pant, you should probably need to go back and listen to some old episodes. So hopefully this is not a surprise. But the most telling stat for me was not so much Rishabh Pant's 29 of 40, but during that partnership, Rahane struck at a much faster strike rate than he did before or even after. And I think that is very telling, where the impact of a player is not just, I've said this a lot, by the way, when it comes to bowling, and when it came to Jadeja as well, but the impact of a player is not just how many runs he makes. So you can look at 29 of 40 and say, yeah, it's a good start, got some boundaries, was accelerated a little. But in that partnership, when he was able to enable Rahane to loosen up a little and unleash the shackles, I think that was the true impact of that inning. So for me, not enough runs. Would have liked to see him make at least 15, 20 more runs, and got out, unfortunately, doing what he does best, which is swiping at a ball that didn't deserve to be swiped to. But man, a critical innings in terms of momentum and setting up Jadeja to come in to succeed right after him.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll come back to you for Jadeja, but Varun, you talk a little bit about Rahane's knock. I mean, skipper for the day, some may call him a temporary captain, some may call him a stand-in captain, but how much character does it take to come out with your team kind of 61 for 2 after that disaster in Adelaide and score a magnificent 100? Magnificent. I mean, he's the ice to Kohli's fire, right? And he took on the bowling when he needed to, and in the context of the series, probably changed the complexion of the series completely with that 100.
Yeah, and to think 2.5 years ago, he was dropped in South Africa during a test match, right? So for me, I think it was fantastic. It just showed his determination. I think as captain, he had that little bit of extra pressure on him. He wanted to come out and lead from the front. All the plans that he probably talked about depended a lot on his batting. And I would have thought that, somebody like him expected a Pujara and Vihari to rally around him, but unfortunately it didn't happen. So he had to step up. And I don't know if you guys saw or not, but the Telegraph carried an article that said something like, I can't remember the headline, but it says something like
Rahane benefits from dropped catches.
Yeah,
right?
and gets to 100. And you got Wasim Jafar, Harsha Bogle, right, like all over them, just saying you clearly don't watch the game. If you said drop catches.
Stupid article to write. What a stupid article to write. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah,
it's a guy who reads the Cricket Info commentary and doesn't watch the game.
But I think it was great. And then when Jadeja got, when Jadeja was on 49, they tried to take a quick single and he got run out. Now, again, don't get me wrong. I've said before that people have got PR specialists advising them. But with Rahane, you don't feel that because Rahane got run out and Jadeja didn't make it to 50. But you could see Rahane walk up to Jadeja, kind of pat him on the chest and say, and you know what, doesn't matter, you keep going, do what you're doing. And it's that kind of reassurance that you need. Now, you may recall that in the previous game, Rahane ran out Kohli and Kohli didn't walk across and tell him keep going. Now, it's just different styles. It doesn't mean one is bad, the other is good. But when you're the leader of a team that has just gone through a 36 all-out, I think to come out like that and behave the way he did and bat the way he did was just magnificent. And I want to add also, I think all of us were backing him. When the new ball was taken and Jadeja and Rahane were batting, like I know a lot of us decided not to move. We just stayed in the same spot. We said, if we can somehow ride this, the game will be ours. And they did just that.
Yeah, brilliant summary. I don't think I can add anything to that. You know what they say. I mean, they talk about Kohli's aggression and stuff, but Rahane is very much in the Rahul Dravid form of aggression, right? And I think Matthew Hayden once said about Dravid, if you want to see aggression, look into Rahul Dravid's eyes. And I think Rahane very much fits that mold, and great gesture to Jadeja after, unfortunately, Rahane was run out or involved in another run out in the 2 test matches. But Ashwin, I want to come to you about Jadeja. Right, we talked very briefly about this. He's in the top all-rounders in the world. The difference between his batting average and his bowling average is probably the best of the current all-rounders. I think it's only bettered by Imran Khan in the history of the game, which is absolutely incredible. Warren was banging on about, the all-rounder has to have a better batting average than a bowling average. And Jadeja has that. So has that search for an all-rounder in Test cricket ended with Jadeja? And he held himself in with the bat. He played an un-Jadeja-like innings almost. He is a brilliant fielder. He contributes with the ball as well. So is he a certainty in this lineup now?
I mean, it's tough to say he's a certainty. I think he probably is definitely going to get the next few games. Like I've said before, he opens up a lot of options. So great statistics about his batting average minus his bowling average, which has kind of become an interesting proxy for quality all-rounders. But I mean, just outstanding. It wasn't just the fact that he made a 50. It was the way he batted. It was the way he was completely happy to leave the ball that he didn't need to hit, frustrated the quick bowlers a little. And of course, like I've said before, it's all about partnerships. He partnered with Rahane in a team that has typically seen when we lose our 5th or 6th wicket, we collapse very quickly after. To have your guy come in at number 7, bat out, it was a fantastic 6-wicket partnership. So very, very happy for him and for India.
Absolutely. And I mean, Jadeja got bounced out by Stark. There were some words exchanged. To cut a long story short, we folded pretty quickly after that. And what may have been more than like a 150-run lead ended up as a 131-run lead, right? Now, the question that we will leave you with at the end of this break was India on the cusp of a win? We will see you straight after this break.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. One more reminder, people, please go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and help us out. It will take you a couple of minutes to fill out this survey, but it really is very, very helpful for us. For the people who do fill out the survey and are willing to drop us their email address, we're going to do a special drawing and send out some IVM swag to everybody. So please do help us out with that. But what a week it's been on the network. There's so many things to talk to you all about. Let me run through some of the biggest highlights really, really quickly, right? So Sanjay Jha was on Cyrus Says. What an incredible conversation. I mean, I can't say enough about it. Check that out. We had Hansal Mehta on Marukinay's Note talking about 1992 scam. Amazing stuff. We had Vishal Gondal talking to Nikhil Advani about his career in film. On Storytellers and Storysellers, Vineet spoke to Gunjan Arya, the CEO of OML, and Samiksha Unyal from Bacardi about the history of NH7, the Weekender Festival. On Postcards from Nowhere, Utsav had an amazing episode about the Bushmen of Kalahari. Begin the Journey, Ashish Vidyarthi talks about career choices. On Nankari, they talk about cake. What a fun show that was. And on This Round is on Me, we had Dr. Sanjay Arora talking to Gauri about Suburban Diagnostics and Company and what he sees as the future of healthcare in India. And for our Tamil speakers, if you haven't been checking out Sivakami and Sabatam, why haven't you? Please do go check that out. Kavita's doing an amazing job telling that story. And with that, let me get you back to your show.
Welcome back from that break, and we're talking about the famous Boxing Day comeback win by India against Australia. Guys, where we left you was there was a 131-run lead. India was coming out to bowl in Australia's second innings. Joe Burns was out there with Matthew Wade. He went early again. Really, guys, I mean, that guy has just had a horrendous series. He scored a 50 in the Adelaide Test. I suspect he's probably the one that's going to sit out when David Warner comes back in. But let's talk about Ashwin again. I mean, we've talked a lot about him already. He already had Smith's number, and then the Smith clone, Manas Labuschagne, went exactly like Smith went in Adelaide, man. I mean, how good is Ashwin? How good has he been in this series? I mean, we talked about his average being 48 in Australia before this series, but guys, he's now averaging 17 in this series. Ashwin, I'm going to come to you on this. What has he changed in this series to basically be India's outstanding bowler along with Bumrah?
I mean, I've said before, I'm a big fan. You don't get 350 odd wickets without having absolutely a phenomenal test record all over the world, right? Yes, he probably just slightly better at home than away, but find me a bowler today that doesn't, who's at this level, who doesn't, right? Jimmy Anderson, for example, gets all his wickets at home. So I think he's just delivering against his plans. I think honestly he's trying less crazy wonky stuff, right? Like in the IPL and in some of the limited overs games he played domestically and stuff, he was trying leg spins and doing all these things. He was bowling 4 off breaks in a row and then just that beautiful carom ball right after. So absolutely magnificent. Really, really great to see him. I mean, for me personally, maybe because we share a name, I've never doubted his ability, his talent, his skill to be at the top of the game. It's just nice to see it coming true in Australia.
Ashwin, just to pick on that, do you think he's imparting more overspin on the ball like Nathan Lyon does to get more bounce? Because we saw a lot of balls actually bouncing over the stumps when they were reviewed, right? So it seems like it's a slightly different mode of attack here with him overspinning the ball rather than side spinning it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what Lyon does, right? And so I think he's obviously learned his way about how to succeed as a spinner in Australia, and it'll be interesting to see as they move to Sydney, which it looks like now has been confirmed, whether he goes back to some of the habits that have worked better for him in India and other parts of the world, but great to see him adapting his game for Melbourne.
Varun, I'm going to ask you the next question, which is Gavaskar before this test match actually said that Ashwin was sidelined by management and because he spoke up in team meetings. Now, we talked about Ashwin being friends with Jinx and Pujara and really being the leadership group in this test. Do you think he was freed up almost in this test match? Did he want to do well for his friend? Like, I mean, if we're playing a game together and I know, like you're my friend, I want to do well for you, right? That's. Do you think there's more of a feeling there? Or am I reading too much into this?
No, I think, look, I think the catch is when you represent India, you want to do well every time. I think the difference is he probably realized this is a chance where he has the ear of the captain. And that's when he had the opportunity to say, I want to do a few things. I know we already talked about this, but guys, I was slouching on the couch when I was watching that ball to Labuschagne. And you may believe me, you may not, but the second the ball left his hand, I kind of stood up before the wicket was taken. And that was how brilliant it was. You could see when that wicket happened, Rahane just smiled and pointed at Ashwin as if this was part of the plan. So I think it's just that Ashwin is probably getting a chance to do what he wants. And the environment, let's be honest, it's not that great for somebody like Ashwin, who got a lot of flack from Kohli and Dhawan after doing the Mankad as well in the IPL 2 years ago. So I think it's just being able to play freely that has changed it a lot for him.
Absolutely. And Ashwin, let's talk a little bit about his fitness. Now, the key question for me is, can Ashwin maintain his fitness for the entire series? We've seen him do well in England as well as Australia, but he's been injured and sat out the latter part of the series. Now, do you think he can maintain his fitness here? Of course, he's not the quickest mover in the world. We saw Gill kind of go past him after Ashwin had a 50-meter lead. So thoughts on Ashwin's fitness and perhaps his sponsorship deal with Nike as well?
Yeah, the sponsorship deal with Nike was pretty funny from 2 years ago. Obviously, Ashwin has never been the quickest on the field, so it becomes a tough question on where do you put him? Because yes, he's an incredibly talented bowler, but he's neither a great catcher nor obviously a quick runner. So at some point you saw Rahane move him around and the ball seemed to chase him in the field for a couple of sessions. But one particularly funny moment was when I think it was on the offside and Shubman Gill was at sort of a silly point area and Ashwin was, at a deep extra cover and the ball was running towards the boundary and Gill set off and just zipped so fast that he actually got to the boundary before Ashwin did. And it was just, shining a spotlight on Ashwin's lack of fitness. Look, he bowls a lot, right? He bowled 27 overs in one innings, I think 37 in the others, or I think it was 24 and 37. So it's a lot of overs to put in. But, it looks like he's doing okay. I haven't heard anything about his fitness yet. I hope he's able to keep his fitness up because to your point, being able to finish off series is what differentiates a good player from a great or a great from an all-time great. And so hopefully he can do it and see his team through to victory later in this series.
Absolutely. Now, let's talk about the quicks, man. We've talked about Ashwin. A huge blow with Umesh's injury in the second innings, right? And that puts into context India's decision to actually play 5 bowlers, including Jadeja in this game. All I could think about really was the old India team with Zahir Khan and Harbhajan Singh, and they were just 4 bowlers, right? And one injury there made us have 3 bowlers, which was just, there was no way we would have done this with 3 bowlers. Let's talk also about Siraj, man. His dad passed away at before the series began. He couldn't go back to see him. It must have really upset him. You can't even put that into words, right? But let's talk about Siraj with that old ball. He was held back on the first day, took those 2 wickets, super exuberant when he appeals. Ashwin, I'm going to ask you this. We've judged Siraj on the basis of his white ball IPL performances. Red ball lengths and lines are completely different. Jaidev Unadkat is another example of that. Do we judge bowlers too harshly depending on the glare that they are put in on under the IPL spotlight?
I'm not quite sure it's do we judge them too harshly based on the IPL spotlight? Because you have to succeed at the top levels if you want to play at those top levels. For me, it's more a question of, are we judging quality red ball bowlers based on white ball performance? And the same can be true for batsmen as well in some cases. But it should be fine. Siraj and Saini both, by the way, have fantastic red ball records domestically. Their path should have been do well with the red ball, find your way into the red ball international side. Obviously, what the IPL has done is it's made them more household names with the white ball, which is not their area of expertise. And their figures don't look quite as good. So I don't quite think it's that we shouldn't be judging players in the IPL. It's more let's let red ball specialists play more with the red ball and focus on getting into the test team like Pujara does, like Ishant has done more recently in his career. It's just stay a little bit more focused. So I think that's more of the question.
I think it might be quite tough given the large paychecks the IPL provide, but we'll see whether they can super specialize.
And again, I'm not saying they shouldn't play it. I'm saying we should just say that, okay, just because they're not good at the IPL doesn't mean they're bad test players. So it's more on us than it is on them. I'm not trying to deprive a player of the opportunity to make good money.
It's a little bit like what happened to Ishant Sharma, right? He's a great test match bowler, but he hasn't done that well in the IPL over the years or limited overs games. Right, let's move on. Australia was still battling away. Matthew Wade was sticking around. He played a very unnatural sort of innings, kind of sticking around. But what was really interesting, and Varun, I'm going to come to you on this because I really want you to get into this, is his battle with Pant, right? Pant, I think, provides something to the Indian cricket team that Saha can never provide. He just irritates the batsmen. He gets under their skin. We saw it all through the last test series. He called Tim Paine a temporary captain. He was being sledged by Tim Paine, being called babysitter and all of that stuff. But how much did Pant actually contribute to Matthew Wade getting out? You saw Matthew Wade almost turn around and get irritated at him.
Yeah, he gets under your skin for sure. If he had that superpower to get them out, it would be just amazing. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's a great distraction because the Aussies need somebody to focus on. They need to channel their energy into someone. And last series, it was kind of Virat Kohli and Rishabh Pant. This time with Kohli gone, I'm very happy for them to focus on Pant and let the other guys do their stuff. So it can be irritating. And in fact, Wade, I think, got extremely frustrated because he just said, Pant just keeps laughing. I don't know if he's laughing at my batting. It must be funny. I don't know if he's laughing seeing himself on the big screen. He doesn't say much, but he just keeps laughing. So, it's not like he's sledging, But I think it's all fun, man, especially for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes for great viewing at the back, right? But Steve Smith went again cheaply, this time bowled around his legs. The ICC Test Player of the Decade ended 2020 with fewer runs than Prithvi Shaw, as I said. Also, Varun, do you think that honour was deserved after Sandpaper Gate, him getting the ICC Test Player of the Decade?
That's a tough one, actually. I didn't even think about that. Like, I think it's interesting, man. I don't know the answer to that. I'm gonna have to think about that a little bit more. His records speak for itself. But there is always that little bit that people are going to question. I'm sorry, actually, I don't have a clear answer to this. I need to think about that, DJ.
Ashwin, your thoughts on the morality of that award?
I don't know about morality. I think from a batting standpoint, from a quality, I think he's paid his dues. He's paid his price. Got banned from the game for a little while, has now come back. So I think I'm okay with it.
Okay, fair enough. Back to the test match. Cam Greens and Pat Cummins briefly resisted, but I mean, they were 99 for 6. They dragged it into the fourth day. India started off the fourth day quite cagily, trying to keep the runs down. But when the new ball came, they went back to their main man. And I mean, he delivered again. It was all down to Bumrah. He had Pat Cummins gloving to Gully. And I mean, the lead went past 36. The tension grew a little bit. There was some more chatter about umpire's call. I mean, we had the first innings incident with Labuschagne, right? Well, the ball looked for all money it was going to hit. Also, lots of controversy with Tim Payne in the second innings, where it looked like he'd missed the ball, but he was given out based on a snicko. There was one where Cummins padded up and the ball looked like it was going over. Ashwin, what do you make of this umpire's call business? Are you happy with it? Are you okay with it? Is there too much margin for error there for the umpires?
I mean, I think, look, we're oversimplifying a situation that's not that simple, right? Shane Warne and some of the cricketers have said, if it's hitting according to the projection, it should be out. And if it's not, it shouldn't. It's not that simple. I think we're just visualizing the margin of error wrongly. So I think they should be showing ranges, basically, right? So when they show the decision, they should show not just one ball hitting the wickets, but at the final point of contact, they should show what the system's range is, which is a half ball on either side. And that's what will make us understand, okay, it was somewhere in this range, which is not conclusive enough to give out. So I think it's more a question of how the technology visualizes it than about it's not as straightforward as saying, hey, if it's hitting the stumps, it should be out. Because any team, when the decision goes against you, it's just an infuriating moment because it feels like it's out. But I think they need to find a better way to show it to both the fans and the players.
Absolutely. It's a presentation point. I don't disagree with that one at all. But I mean, the Australians held out just before lunch. There was one over to go after the play was extended because they were 9 wickets down. And they were finally bowled out for exactly 200. So they didn't go past 200 in this series as yet. And India were left with a target of 70. Of course, Shane Warne was going on about how they'd been bowled out for 36. And I mean, Indian fans were tense, man. We were tense. We didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, any other day, we would have thought, okay, easy, go to sleep, chill. But Gill and Mayank came out. Mayank again looked all at sea. It was pretty unfortunate. He got out without too many runs on the board. But talk me through Gill's little innings there. How calm does that man look under pressure?
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned, it looked like he belonged here. I really like the fact that he's not afraid to go for his shots. Like, he's not a guy who, in Ricky Ponting's word, looks tentative, right? That's the way Ricky Ponting described the Australian batting. He goes for his shots. He wants to keep the scoreboard ticking. I think it's important, especially when you're playing overseas. And let's not get it wrong. He is going to get out for 0. He is going to be dismissed cheaply, as of all opening batsmen of India on overseas tours to the Sena countries. So my only view is give him a chance. I personally do think he's going to play the next 2 test matches. And yeah, man, if he can stay in, it just solidifies this lineup so much more.
Absolutely. And I mean, Pujara played a pretty poor shot, just hanging his bat out there. We were 19 for 2. Of course, Jinx walks in again and really took the bowling on. He took it by the collar and started hitting some boundaries. Ashwin, let's talk about that winning run, right? There was absolutely no emotion after hitting that winning run. And it really reminded me of when MSD in 2008 asked his players not to show emotion after beating Australia, just because it should be a matter of course. Do you think there was a little bit of that by Rahane there?
Maybe. I mean, if you look at his century celebrations and stuff as well, his overall style of celebrations is much more muted. He's also matured a lot over the years. His style is just a little different. So I didn't think about it till you asked the question. There's maybe an element of, the way they say when you get hit by the ball as a batsman, don't show the bowler that you got hurt. Same way when you beat Australia, don't show them that it's exciting for you. This is just par for the course, right? So I was glad to see it. I really hoped he had hit the runs off the boundary of the last ball of Labuschagn's over. But of course, like I mentioned, they made Rahane work for it a few extra balls and he finished with a single. But it was just magnificent to see. Even though there wasn't an outward celebration, you knew inside he was feeling that joy we were all feeling.
Absolutely. And Australia also managed to drop another catch with mid-Stark putting Rahane down. But I don't think Indian fans could have asked for more than that. A 8-wicket victory, resounding win. And I mean, just putting an end to 2020 on a high. Just absolutely brilliant, I thought. We haven't quite got to 2 hours, but let's quickly preview the third test, guys. To my mind, there's two questions. First one is the Rohit question. Varun, I'm going to ask you first. Where does Rohit fit into this team? Does he fit into this team? Do India need to make that change?
Yeah, they do. I think Rohit coming in will boost the batting lineup, even if it's just on paper. Rohit will replace Mayank in my squad, and to me, it's a no-brainer. I think the other one, just to talk through the changes for the third test, is that Umesh is probably out, right? Even in the picture they put up, you could see he had something on his calf as well. So if that's the case, I mean, I just want to put it out there. I hope that Natarajan plays instead of Saini. I'm not a big fan of Saini or Umesh. And if somehow Natarajan can make it, he's been bowling well in the nets. Those would be the two changes I would make for the next test.
Ashwin, your thoughts on India's 11 for the next test, particularly if Umesh is unfit?
Yeah, I'm actually in a slightly different place where I don't think Natarajan has the kind of experience needed. And so I would actually play Saini. I think Saini, very similar to the previous comment I made, Saini is a quality red ball bowler. And so I don't want to judge him based on his RCB performances or his IPL performances, etc. I think he's an excellent red ball bowler who's proven his mettle in India. I think it's tough to have two newer bowlers, but hey, you're missing Shami, you're missing Ishant, now you might be missing Umesh. It's all we have. So I would play Saini, and then I think Rohit walks into the side. He wouldn't have flown in and done the quarantine, etc. And by the way, Rahane in the post-match conference did allude to it too. He said Rohit's excited to join us and find his way back into the team. So I'm expecting that change as well.
So for Mayank, right?
Yeah, that's what's tough for me, is that there's a world where you think of, do you drop a Vihari? Because if he's not bowling, is Vihari deserving of his spot in the side as a pure batsman and then play around with the batting orders? But I think with Mayank struggling and it being, Mayank just doesn't look like he can score. It's not that he's looked good and gotten unlucky. He just hasn't looked like he can score. And so I think he comes in for Mayank.
Varun, is there a world where Kuldeep plays the test match in the SCG where it does take spin and we only play the 2 quicks and 3 spinners?
I think, yeah, if Vihari replaces Ashwin, definitely Kuldeep could play.
Okay, I don't think that computes. But what I'm asking you, can he replace Umesh? Yeah, can he replace Umesh? He took a 5-for at the SCG last time.
I mean, I think the challenge is this is a winning 11. I think Jadeja and Ashwin are both playing. I think you do need 3 seamers. So I don't think Kuldeep will play. It would be a great move. Look, especially with Warner back, Smith struggling against Ashwin, I think it would be really interesting to see somebody like Kuldeep come in and try to trouble the Aussies. But unfortunately, I don't think there's a spot for him.
Okay. So I think that is the 11. I think we're actually going to go with Saini, or if Umesh is fit, Umesh stays in, or it's going to be Saini replacing him. I don't think India is going to go with the move of replacing Umesh with Kuldeep if he's unfit. Anyway, guys, I think that's everything about the Boxing Day test match. And we had a couple of interesting things to talk about. Of course, it's the end of 2020. It's been a crazy year for cricket. And I'm just going to ask you guys, what is your favorite moment of 2020? I'm not asking you for the decade because I know you're not going to be able to remember very much from the rest of the decade. But what is your favorite moment of 2020? Varun, you go first.
I'm not going to say the Boxing Day test because that's the most recent. I think I'm actually going to say Delhi Capitals making it to the final of the IPL.
Nice. I think that's an interesting one. Ashwin, a different moment, same moment. Have you got another favorite moment of this crazy year of 2020?
I mean, honestly, Delhi reaching the finals has to be right up there. I was going to say that probably my favorite day was that doubleheader day in the IPL when we had both back-to-back super overs. Just as a cricket fan, that was phenomenal. But as an India fan, it's really hard to look past ending the year with a win at the MCG. I think that might be my favorite moment for quite a while. So yes, recency bias, but even if I look through the whole year, it has to be, this is a magnificent moment. We were all just so proud.
It was our only test win in 2020, man. It was a great win.
Exactly.
So you can't argue with that. I think my moment, actually, and I'm surprised you didn't come up with this, given your excitement to see live cricket back on our televisions, was the restart and the recommencement of cricket with the West Indies versus England, the whole Black Lives Matter video. And it was just so emotional, just seeing live cricket come back onto our screens. And I mean, we all followed that, right? It was just brilliant. And hopefully we don't have to go through this for much longer. I mean, 2020 has been a great year for our podcast as well. We had some amazing guests on. We've had some fantastic interactions with listeners. Before I let you guys go, quickly, favorite episode of 2020, guys. Varun, you go again first. I think I know the answer to this one.
It has to be Danny Morrison. The Danny Morrison episode for me was like a dream come true.
Yeah, absolutely. When we started this podcast, I think if you said we're going to interview Danny Morrison, that would have been the end of the podcast. That would have been the final episode of the series and done, right? Ashwin, have you got a different one?
Now that we've got Danny, I'm going to say we're going to get Rishabh Pant on the podcast, and then I think we're done.
Okay, if you clearly have got to connect. Ashwin, have you got a different one?
The Danny one was right up there. I distinctly, I've said this before, one of my favorite interviews we've done was the Jadeja Nutcut episode. So during lockdown, to be able to talk to him, hear his stories, it's been a wild ride even for him since then. But that's just a really vivid, exciting memory. The other one that was fun for me was when we redid the World Cup. So we kind of went match by match and played, relived some of the important matches of the World Cup during lockdown. So some of those were really fun for me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think I was going to go with the Ronak episode as well. That was a great episode, reliving the 2011 World Cup. But guys, that is the final episode, and it's a wrap for this year, 2020. Thank you, gents, for joining me. It's been a pleasure, as always, speaking to you. I think we're taking a break next week, given that the next test match starts on the 6th of January. So we will see you once that has concluded. But until then, guys, please take care. It's been a crazy year. Thank you for joining us throughout this year. And we will see you in 2021. Until then, do keep in touch. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at One Tip One Hand. And write in at contact@onetiponehand.com and let us know what you think about the show. A very happy new year to you guys. Ashwin, Varun, if I don't speak to you next week, take care and enjoy the rest of the holidays, man.
Awesome. Thank you.
Whether you're an established sports person or a budding one, or simply a sports enthusiast, join us, Tanvi and Shlok.
We are two passionate pro badminton players talking policy, mindset and everything sport.
So tune in to The Millennial Athlete every Monday.
Only on the IVM Podcast Network.
Trust us, it's gonna be lit.
Do you wonder what goes inside the mind of an achiever? How do they manage to get back up on their feet in spite of their failures? Do they really do something different? You're absolutely right. Yes, they do. I'm Aditi Surana. Join me every Wednesday and Friday on my show Absolutely Right, where I use my special tool of handwriting analysis, also known as graphology, to interview high performers and study secrets behind their success and personality. You can catch us on the IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you get your podcast from.